The sword in the stone that wasn't stone. The air on Vorthen Prime tasted of rust and storms. It was the kind of place where lightning didn't just fork across the sky. It stalked the ground like a predator, striking without warning, splitting boulders in half with deafening cracks. The expedition team had been warned about the Central Plateau, but that's where the artifact was, the one whispered about in alien myths for over 4 centuries. Every native legend spoke of it as the Bound Blade, a weapon forged by a civilization so ancient that even their ruins had been swallowed by the shifting earth. Nobody knew why the blade was there, half buried in a jagged pedestal of black crystal. Nobody knew who had placed it there, and nobody knew why every attempt to move it had ended in failure. Until now. Third attempt today, Captain Serex grunted, pacing in the mud. His taloned feet left deep grooves, and his tail twitched with barely contained impatience. The Traksha warlord brought 10 of his strongest. The blade didn't so much as tremble. From where I stood, the so-called blade looked less like a sword and more like a sliver of frozen lightning. A jagged, silver-white weapon embedded deep in a crystalline pillar that pulsed faintly, as though it had a heartbeat. I wasn't supposed to be here. I was just the mission's systems engineer. My job was to keep the dropship from falling apart in the planet's corrosive atmosphere. I wasn't trained for alien rituals or heavy lifting. But when our cargo specialist collapsed from heat stroke this morning, they dragged me along to record data instead. Or so I thought. The clearing was ringed by alien warriors of every shape and size. 6-eyed insectoids in obsidian armor. Reptilian brutes whose shoulders could crush boulders. Avian scouts with eyes like molten gold. All of them stood at a respectful distance from the sword, as if afraid to get too close. "It is cursed," one of the locals hissed. His voice was like stone grinding against stone. "Every warrior who touches it feels their strength drain away. The blade chooses its wielder, and so far, it has chosen no one." "Or," muttered Yara, our human linguist, "it's just a very clever locking mechanism." Captain Serex shot her a look sharp enough to draw blood. "You think your kind can explain the will of the ancients?" Yara just shrugged. "I think we've seen enough so-called sacred relics that turn out to be tech." One by one, alien champions stepped forward. The first was a Hulvik brute, easily 3 meters tall, his arms like tree trunks. He wrapped his massive claws around the hilt and pulled. The sword didn't move. His muscles swelled. His claws dug grooves into the crystalline surface. And then he staggered back, panting, his skin pale with exhaustion. The crowd murmured. The second attempt came from a lean, 4-armed warrior whose species was famous for precision engineering. He tried twisting the hilt, pushing instead of pulling, even striking the pillar with a vibrating blade to weaken it. The pillar didn't so much as chip. By the 5th attempt, the air was heavy with failure. "Human!" Serex's voice cut through the murmurs like a whip crack. It took me a second to realize he meant me. "You're next." I blinked. "Me? I'm not." "It will be amusing," Serex said with a predator's grin. "Your kind boasts of resilience. Let us see how long you last before the sword drains you." The aliens chuckled, the kind of low, knowing laugh predators make when they've already decided how the hunt will end. I opened my mouth to refuse, but Yara's eyes caught mine. There was a glint there, a sharp calculation. She gave the tiniest shake of her head, then mouthed, "Do it." So I did. The moment I stepped into the circle, the world felt quieter. The chatter faded. Even the constant rumble of distant storms seemed to hush. Up close, the sword was mesmerizing, its blade etched with runes that shifted like liquid metal, the hilt wrapped in something that looked like leather but felt warm, almost alive, under my fingertips. The moment I touched it, a shiver crawled up my spine. Not the draining sensation the others had described. This was different, like the sword was watching me back. I wrapped my hand around the hilt, every muscle in my body tensed, bracing for the pull, the strength-draining curse. But instead of weakness, something else flooded in: heat, pressure, an ancient awareness. It was like touching a live power conduit, except instead of pain, there was recognition. The runes along the blade flared, bright enough to sting my eyes. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I pulled. The crystal around the blade groaned like a glacier shifting in the deep. Cracks spiderwebbed outward, glowing from within. A sound, low, resonant, alive, thrummed through the ground under my boots. And then, with a sound like shattering glass, the sword came free. The weight was perfect. Not heavy, not light, as if it had been balanced for me. The air itself seemed to bend around the blade, the colors sharpening, the storm overhead pausing mid-growl. Every alien in the clearing stared, their expressions caught somewhere between awe and fear. Serex's jaw hung open. The locals fell to one knee. Even Yara, who I thought didn't believe in any of this, looked like she'd just seen a ghost. Then the ground shook. It wasn't the storm. It wasn't an earthquake. It was something waking up. Somewhere deep beneath the plateau, something ancient shifted. The crystal pedestal collapsed inward, vanishing into a black void. The sword in my hands pulsed once, a deep, resonant heartbeat that wasn't mine, and I knew, without knowing how, that pulling it free had been a signal. Not just to the people here, to whatever had made it, and whatever that was now coming. The signal beneath the world. The moment the pedestal vanished, the plateau changed. The air, once heavy with storm and static, turned sharp and thin. My ears popped as though the pressure had shifted, and every alien warrior instinctively took a step back. Beneath my boots, the ground hummed. Not a sound exactly, but a vibration, deep, rhythmic, like a great engine buried miles below. The sword in my grip echoed it, pulsing in time, each beat sending a faint shimmer up my arm. "What have you done?" Serex's voice was a low snarl, but it carried more fear than anger. Before I could answer, the plateau itself seemed to respond. The black crystal veins in the ground lit from within, lines of molten silver racing outward in every direction, forming patterns too intricate for me to follow. They weren't random. They were a map, or a circuit, and we had just turned it on. The alien crowd was restless now, their posture stiff, their gazes darting to the horizon as if expecting something to crest it any second. The locals spoke in hushed tones, their language harsh and clipped. I didn't need Yara to translate the one word I heard repeated over and over. Guardian. A shadow passed overhead. I looked up, and for the first time since we'd landed, I realized the storms weren't natural. They were orbiting. A vast swirl of black clouds ringed a clear circle directly above the plateau, and through that window, something glinted in the pale sky. It was moving. "Everyone, back to the ship," Serex ordered, his voice taut. His talons clicked against the crystal as he backed away. Now, the ground trembled again, harder this time. Somewhere below, rock cracked and water hissed into steam. The vibration was no longer steady. It was accelerating, like the heartbeat of something waking from centuries of sleep. Yara grabbed my arm. "You need to put it back." I glanced at the black void where the pedestal had been. "There's no back to put it into." She cursed under her breath. "Then maybe you just doomed all of us." A fissure split the ground a few meters away, glowing white-hot at the edges. The air filled with a metallic tang that stung my sinuses. Another fissure appeared to my left. Then another. They were forming a ring around me. The aliens stepped back farther. Even Serex, proud and predatory, gave me space now. Not because they feared me, but because they feared what the sword had awakened. The fissures widened, and then something rose from them. It wasn't flesh. It wasn't metal. It was both and neither. A shifting lattice of crystal and molten alloy, forming the vague silhouette of a towering biped. The thing had no face, only a smooth, oval headplate etched with runes identical to those on the sword. When it moved, the runes pulsed in perfect sync with the blade in my hands. It stepped forward, the ground denting beneath its weight, and lowered its head until that faceless plate was inches from mine. And then, it knelt. The crowd erupted into chaos, some shouting in disbelief, others backing away entirely. The word guardian hissed through the air like a warning. Serex looked between me and the construct. His eyes were wide, but there was something else there now. Calculation. "It recognizes you," he said slowly. "That should be impossible." I didn't feel recognized. I felt claimed. The connection between the sword and the construct wasn't metaphorical. I could feel its presence in my head now, a pressure behind my thoughts. Not words, not images, just an awareness. Like someone standing directly behind you in the dark. Chosen. The word wasn't spoken. It just existed in my mind. Chosen for what? I whispered, though my voice was swallowed by the storm above. The construct rose, turning its head toward the horizon. The glowing fissures snapped shut behind it, the molten edges cooling instantly. Without looking back, it began to walk, and I realized it wasn't just wandering. It was following something, or hunting. The alien warriors hesitated only a moment before giving chase. Serex barked orders in his native tongue, sending scouts flanking around the construct. Yara stuck close to me, her gaze fixed on the blade in my hand. "You have no idea what you just triggered," she said. "I'm starting to get that feeling. This isn't just a weapon," she continued, glancing at the runes. "It's a key, and whatever it just opened isn't going to stop until it finishes whatever it was built to do." We followed the construct down a slope of fractured crystal into a valley carved with strange, geometric patterns. The moment its feet touched the valley floor, the lines beneath the surface lit up again, this time in a spreading wave that reached the far cliffs. The cliffs moved, segments of stone folded inward, revealing vast gates that had been buried for who knows how long. Beyond them, I caught glimpses of more shapes, colossal, dormant constructs lying in orderly rows, like a silent army waiting for a command. The sword pulsed in my grip again, harder this time. Command. The concept filled my mind, heavy and absolute. The constructs weren't moving yet, but I could feel their attention shift toward me, even through the gates. I took an involuntary step back. Nope. Whatever this is, I am not in charge of an army of alien death machines. The construct turned its faceless head toward me, and for a moment, the runes on its surface dimmed, almost like a frown. Then, without warning, a sound split the air. Not from the constructs. From the sky. A streak of fire tore through the clouds, followed by another and another. Dropships, not ours. Sleek, insectal shapes bristling with weapons, descending fast. Serex swore. Vecran raiders. They must have detected the energy surge. I didn't know much about Vecran except that they were the kind of species that considered cultural artifacts fair game for plunder. If they got their claws on the sword, or the constructs, the galaxy was in for a bad century. "They're coming for you," Yara said, her voice grim. I tightened my grip on the sword. "No, they're coming for this." The first dropship fired before it even touched down. A barrage of plasma bolts streaked toward the construct. The blast struck its torso, splashing harmlessly across the crystalline lattice. And in the same motion, it raised an arm and fired a beam of searing light that cut the dropship in half. The wreckage smoldered in the valley floor. The rest of the Vecran fleet didn't slow down. The gates behind us rumbled. One of the colossal constructs shifted, its limbs unfolding with the sound of 1,000 grinding gears. Another followed, then another, the valley filled with the thunder of awakening machines. Yara stared at me. "I think they're waiting for you to give the order." My mouth went dry. "I don't even know what the order is." "You will," she said. "Or we're all dead." The sword pulsed again, and this time, I didn't just feel the beat. I understood it. I lifted the blade. The runes flared to life, brighter than they had yet been, casting sharp shadows across the valley. The constructs all turned their faceless heads toward me, their movements in perfect sync. Above, the Vecran ships closed in. Below, the ancient army waited, and somewhere, in the deepest part of my mind, the word formed again, this time louder. Command. The first command. The word command wasn't just a thought anymore. It was a current, running through my bones, pulling at every muscle and nerve. The ancient constructs stood perfectly still, their glowing runes casting ghostly light across the valley. Above, the Vecran dropships descended in tight formation, their angular hulls reflecting the stormlight. They thought they were the predators. They didn't realize they'd just walked into the teeth of something older. Orders. Yara's voice was tight. She stayed close, crouched low beside me. The aliens who had been following us kept their distance now, wary of the army that seemed to breathe in unison with my heartbeat. I hesitated. The sword pulsed again, faster. I didn't know what to do. It wasn't like recalling a memory. It was more like remembering how to move a limb I'd never used before. The command wasn't in words. It was a pattern, a rhythm I could push out through the blade. I raised the sword high, its runes flaring. The constructs moved. It was like watching mountains wake up. The first rank stepped forward, their crystal feet cracking the ground. Each carried a weapon shaped differently. Spears of molten alloy, blades of jagged light, shields that shimmered like frozen lightning. They didn't roar or signal. They simply advanced, their movements terrifyingly precise. The Vecren opened fire. Plasma bolts lit the air, streaking down toward the lead construct. The blast struck its shield and dissipated into harmless sparks. Another construct lifted its spear, and with a single sweeping motion, a wave of incandescent energy sliced across the sky. One of the dropships exploded mid-descent, scattering flaming wreckage. The crowd of alien spectators gasped. Some cheered. Others took several steps back. The Vecren weren't deterred. Their ships pivoted, trying to stay out of range. 2 heavy gunships dropped lower, deploying squads of raiders, insectal warriors with chitinous armor and triple-jointed legs that let them leap the distance from ship to ground. They hit the valley floor running, plasma rifles spitting fire. The constructs didn't flinch. They didn't react the way living soldiers would. They simply adjusted their formation, shields interlocking, weapons striking in perfectly timed arcs. The first wave of Vecren hit them like a tide against a cliff, and broke. One raider leapt over the shield wall, aiming for me. I barely had time to register the movement before the nearest construct pivoted and caught it midair, its crystalline hand closing around the alien like a vice. The raider screamed once before the construct slammed it into the ground hard enough to crack the valley floor. Yara winced. Efficient. That's one word for it, I muttered, tightening my grip on the sword. Another pulse rippled through me, and I realized the constructs weren't just protecting me. They were listening, waiting for more. I sent the thought, push forward, and the front line surged, their advance like a single living wall. The Vecren line crumbled. The remaining dropships shifted tactics. Instead of a direct assault, they began targeting the gates behind us, the ones that still hid the dormant constructs. It was smart. If they destroyed those, the army would stay limited in number. They're trying to cut off reinforcements, Yara warned. I can stop them, I said, though the sword in my hands was already making that decision for me. I focused on the nearest gate. In my mind's eye, I could see the sleeping forms within, massive, motionless, waiting. I reached for them, not physically, but through that strange link, pushing the same wake pattern I'd used without knowing earlier. The gate split open. 2 more constructs emerged, their steps slow at first, then purposeful. They joined the battle without hesitation, one hurling a spear of pure light into a gunship's engine, the other raising a barrier that absorbed an entire volley of Vecren fire. I could feel my pulse sinking with theirs now. Every step they took, every strike they made, echoed inside me. Serex appeared at my side suddenly, his reptilian face drawn tight. Human, can you control all of them? I think so, I said, not taking my eyes off the battle. Why? Because more ships are coming, he growled, pointing to the horizon. And he was right. Through the thinning clouds, I could see them, a second wave larger than the first. If the first assault was a test, this was the real strike. The construct leader, the one that had knelt to me, turned its faceless head toward the incoming fleet. Its runes pulsed once, sharply. I didn't hear a voice, but I understood the meaning anyway. Strike first. I raised the sword again and sent the command. The constructs broke formation, moving in sudden, blinding bursts of speed that didn't seem possible for their size. Several leapt, their bodies twisting midair before slamming into the nearest dropships. Others hurled their weapons, which arced like comets before tearing through enemy hulls. The second wave never even reached the valley floor. But the victory wasn't without cost. A section of the crystal wall protecting the gates had collapsed under concentrated fire. I could feel the energy bleeding from the network of runes under the ground. The sword grew heavier in my grip, as though feeding more of its own power into keeping the constructs moving. How long can you hold this? Yara asked. I don't know, I admitted. But if I stop, you can't stop, she finished grimly. The Vecran, realizing brute force wasn't working, changed tactics again. Their remaining ground troops began pulling back, but not to retreat. They were regrouping, forming a circle around something being unloaded from their last intact gunship. At first, I thought it was another weapon. Then it unfolded. It was a construct, smaller than the ones under my control, but built in the same style: crystal lattice, molten joints, runes etched deep. Except its runes glowed a violent red. Yara, I said slowly, that thing looks familiar. She didn't take her eyes off it. Because it's from the same makers as yours. Only they've corrupted it. The red-lit construct moved with terrifying speed, closing the distance to the nearest of mine in seconds. The clash was explosive, literally. Shockwaves rolled through the valley as crystal met crystal, the two machines striking with enough force to send shards of molten alloy into the air. And for the first time, my army faltered. I tried to send a command to flank the red construct, but the signal wavered, like static breaking a transmission. I could feel it pushing back, its presence shoving into my mind like an iron spike. It wasn't just fighting my army. It was fighting me. My knees buckled under the pressure. Yara grabbed my shoulder to steady me, shouting something I couldn't hear over the pounding in my head. I gritted my teeth and pushed harder, sending the mental order again. Two of my constructs moved in, spears stabbing, but the red one caught both in a single motion, twisting and shattering them like glass. They can kill each other? I gasped. They're weapons, not gods, Yara said. And that thing knows how to kill yours. The red construct turned toward me, the molten lines along its body brightening. I could feel its attention, not on my soldiers now, but directly on me. It began to run. The first war of shadows. The vault was sealed. The shard, embedded once more in its rightful place, pulsed faintly like a slumbering heartbeat. The Eclipsera were gone, for now. But Captain Arek Voss knew that kind of victory well. He'd fought wars before. You could win the day and still lose the war. The warning. 2 days after the sealing, Voss stood on the Veil's bridge in Earth orbit, watching Helena Ward's hollow image flicker before him. They've marked you now, she said. The Eclipsera don't forget. Next time, they won't send a test creature. They'll send a wave. Counselor Vaith bristled. If you think we'll just sit and wait, you won't have a choice, Helena interrupted. Your council fleets don't know how to fight them. We've been holding the line for 10,000 years. Even we barely survive. Voss folded his arms. So what's your plan? Helena's gaze sharpened. We prepare. Together. You've got numbers, industrial capacity. We've got the weapons and other things. But if you don't train for this kind of war, you'll break in the first minute. Council response. When they returned to the Galactic Council Central Station, the reaction was chaos. The shards recovered data and the Veil's recordings spread like wildfire. Delegates shouted over one another, some demanding an immediate alliance with Earth, others calling for its quarantine. They're dangerous, one Trashan delegate hissed. They hid this for millennia. What else are they hiding? Voss, standing in the center of the chamber, let them argue for 3 minutes before slamming his hand on the dais. You're arguing about who's to blame while something older than your species is marking your coordinates for invasion. You don't have the luxury of fear. You either work with Earth, or you're dead. The chamber fell into stunned silence. Even Vaith, normally a master of diplomacy, didn't try to soften it. The alliance. It took 2 weeks of brutal negotiations, but finally the council voted, narrowly, to form the Shadow Accord, a joint defense initiative between Earth's keepers and the Galactic Council fleets. In orbit above Earth, the first exchange of technology began. Human engineers moved through alien hangar bays like they'd been born there, stripping weapons systems down in minutes and reassembling them with modifications the Council's best had never imagined. In return, Council energy matter converters tripled the output of Earth's hidden foundries. Helena walked the Veil's hangar, inspecting the new hybrid strike craft, a blend of sleek keeper hulls and Council shield arrays. They're still fragile, she told Voss. But at least now, they'll hurt something before they die. The signal. 3 months into preparations, it came. Not a voice. Not an image. Just a ripple through space itself, a distortion that every sensor in the Accord fleet picked up. It was directional. "They're coming from the Kira Rift," Helena said, studying the readings. "That's not a random entry point. That's the weakest spot in the galactic barrier. If they breach there, they'll spill straight into Council Core worlds." Voss stared at the map. "How long?" Helena's expression darkened. "4 days. The Kira Rift." The Accord fleet dropped out of fold space at the edge of the rift, a churning maelstrom of blue-white energy that stretched across half the viewports. Beyond it, nothing. A void so deep it felt wrong to look at. Ships from 20 worlds held position in a massive arc, their hulls glinting under the rift's glow. In the center floated Earth's warships, black, sharp-edged, bristling with weapons that hummed like they were alive. "This is where we make our stand," Helena said over fleet comms. "Remember, they'll come in shapes you can't predict. If it looks like something, it's lying." The first wave. They came without warning, just appearing like they'd been there all along. Dozens of entities emerged from the rift, their forms bending light and warping space. Some looked like titanic glass serpents, others like cities turned inside out. Council gunners hesitated for half a heartbeat before unleashing a storm of plasma and antimatter. Some of the creatures shattered. Others simply absorbed the fire. Then the Keeper weapons fired. Lances of impossible light cut through the rift spawn, severing them into screaming geometries that collapsed into ash. Voss's pulse quickened. Finally, something that worked. "Keep the pressure on," he barked. The breach engine. Halfway through the battle, the rift bulged. Something massive pushed against the veil of space, like a hand pressing on thin fabric. Helena's face went pale. "That's a breach engine," she said. "If it unfolds fully, we lose the rift. And then the galaxy." Voss didn't wait for orders. "All ships, concentrate fire on the core structure." They did, but the thing healed faster than they could damage it. Segments of its form phased out of reality, making targeting unreliable. Then Voss remembered Helena's words. "If it looks like something, it's lying." The strike. "Helena," he said over comms, "I think the core isn't where we see it." Her eyes lit up with understanding. "You're right. It's projecting a false geometry. Follow my coordinates." She fed the real position to the fleet. Keeper strike craft dove in first, carving a path through riftspawn defenders. Council dreadnoughts poured fire into a patch of empty space. Except it wasn't empty. The breach engine screamed, a sound that rattled teeth and minds alike. Segments of its impossible structure collapsed inward. The cost. The counterattack was brutal. Riftspawn surged, overwhelming several Council frigates and tearing them apart molecule by molecule. Keeper pilots went dark in droves, their ships vanishing into curling spirals of black energy. The Veil took a hit that gutted half its starboard systems, but Voss refused to pull back. "Again," he roared. "Hit it again." One last coordinated volley struck true. The breach engine imploded, pulling dozens of riftspawn with it before the tear sealed shut like a wound. Aftermath. Silence fell. The rift was still. A swirling storm, but no longer bleeding horrors into reality. Fleet-wide comms lit with exhausted cheers, though none of it felt like victory. Too many ships drifted as wreckage. Too many names would never be answered in the roll call. On the Veil's medbay, Voss sat across from Helena. Her armor was scorched, her left arm in a sling. "We bought time," she said. "Nothing more." "How long?" he asked. Her golden eyes met his. "If we're lucky, a few decades. If we're not, a few years." The Accord holds. Back at Council space, the Shadow Accord was no longer a debated experiment. It was law. Joint fleets patrolled border anomalies. Keeper training programs operated on dozens of worlds. The galaxy had seen what waited beyond the rift, and it was afraid. Voss walked the Veil's repaired corridors, the hum of hybrid engines under his boots. They had survived their first Shadow War. But in the deepest part of his mind, he could still hear the shards echo, like distant footsteps, walking steadily closer.